For most of our history, we focused exclusively on the risk of nuclear weapons in setting the time of the clock. Starting in 2007, climate change began factoring more prominently as a direct challenge, a man-made challenge that will dramatically affect life on Earth as we know it and requires urgent and immediate action.
And people are becoming increasingly nervous because North Korea has now fired around about 30 missiles already this year, and the rhetoric coming out of Pyongyang is becoming increasingly aggressive. So over the past couple of months, we've heard them issue these veiled threats that they are going to fire a missile over Japan and into the Pacific Ocean. And so to show, therefore, that they can get near enough to the United States mainland and that they do have the technology to be able to target the US. So it's only natural that countries here, I think, are on high alert and are prepared now for this scenario, which explains a little bit, I think, of what we saw this morning.
And then in terms of reaction, Jean, what are you hearing?
So we've had the usual condemnation this morning from South Korea, Japan and the United States, saying that this missile launch, of course, threatens the peace and stability here in Northeast Asia, and urging North Korea to come back to the negotiating table, because the reality is that North Korea is becoming more of a threat to South Korea, Japan and the United States, because those attempts to...
Recognizing this grim reality, what we'd like to announce is that it is still 2 minutes to midnight, remaining the closest to midnight that the clock has ever been set.
Has the world been teetering on the brink of World War III? This question might seem melodramatic, yet the prevailing state of global affairs compels us to deliberate it. Over the past few years, the world has observed a succession of events that have heightened international tensions. Around 5 years ago, in 2019, we saw the United States and Iran locked in a perturbing face-off. The assassination of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani by the United States in January 2020 marked a significant escalation in this conflict. On top of these international complexities, another pressing issue emerged in the form of escalating tensions with China and North Korea. A considerable concern for the international community has been the development and expansion of their nuclear programs. The denuclearization talks have been rocky, with North Korea continuing to expand its nuclear arsenal and China rapidly modernizing its nuclear forces. This has drawn widespread international criticism and anxiety, further intensifying the global tension. In May 2021, the Israel-Hamas conflict erupted, causing a catastrophic loss of life and property. The 11-day war left more than 250 people dead, the majority being Palestinians, and inflicted substantial damage on Gaza's infrastructure, which was already grappling with years of blockades and previous wars. The estimated cost of the devastation ranged in the hundreds of millions, leaving many homeless and in desperate need of basic necessities. This conflict not only strained Israel's relationship with Hamas, but also had significant implications on international relations, causing widespread protests and deepening divides on the already complicated Middle East issue. Following this, the situation in Ukraine further worsened the global tensions. The war in Ukraine has had a devastating toll, with over 31,000 troop deaths reported and 10,500 civilian deaths, 587 of which were children, and 20,000 casualties. We must also bear in mind Russian soldier casualties. After all, they are humans and in the armed forces to put food in their families' bellies. The conflict has not only triggered a humanitarian crisis, it has also displaced millions of people from their homes. The international response to this crisis has been inconsistent, with some nations offering support and aid, while others have been reproached for indifference. However, the now involvement of the international community, including the USA and UK, with the supply of arms and weapons, planes, missiles, and tanks, has raised tensions to a new high with Russia. There is now talk of troops being sent by NATO, and the nuclear threat from Russia is mentioned daily in our news feed. The impact on the Ukrainian population has been catastrophic, with basic amenities like food and water becoming a luxury for many. This geopolitical turbulence was succeeded by a wave of global protests, fueled by issues ranging from climate change to racial injustice. The world seemed to be on edge, with citizens demanding change and governments struggling. In 2020,
documents from Germany reveal that world leaders are now preparing for Russia to launch World War III. They would expand the war on Ukraine by attacking NATO countries next year. Next year, there's a timetable here. Member of the House Armed Services Committee, Congressman Pat Fallon, is with me. It does sound like these documents reveal a timetable for a Russian attack.
Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Tom McRae. A global conflict has been avoided since 1945 and the end of World War II and its horrors of the Holocaust and atomic bombs dropped on Japan by the US. Now, much of today's international political architecture, such as the United Nations, stems from the aftermath formed by world leaders determined such a disaster would never happen again. Yet conditions comparable to those in World War II are being suffered by many people today, such as in Gaza, Ukraine, Sudan, Yemen, Myanmar and Central Africa, to mention but a few. And in recent years, hundreds of thousands of people have been killed or injured in Syria, Libya, Iraq and Afghanistan as a result of foreign military action, often with East and West backing different sides. But up until now, there's been no outright fighting between Russia or China and the US. But serious conflicts or standoffs between their allies are ongoing. United Nations peacemaking efforts have frequently been limited by deadlock in the Security Council. So is there a real danger of such global conflict erupting into a third world war? We'll be asking our guest this question and many more in just a few moments. But first, Imogen Kimber reports on where the current flashpoints are.
the world was again drawn to the Middle East as a new conflict erupted between Hamas and Israel. This conflict, like the ones that came before it, was rooted in a complex web of historical grievances, territorial disputes, and political machinations. The 2024 Hamas-Israel war, as it has come to be known, is a devastating blow to hopes of peace in the region, and further contributed to the escalating international tensions. The war was sparked by a series of rocket attacks and retaliatory airstrikes that quickly spiraled out of control. The human toll was immense. Hundreds of lives were lost, thousands were injured, and countless more were displaced from their homes. Cities were reduced to rubble, infrastructure was decimated, and the already fragile economy of the region was pushed to the brink of collapse. the conflict reverberated around the world, straining diplomatic relations and fueling divisive debates on international platforms. The international community was divided in its response. Some condemned the violence and called for an immediate ceasefire, while others were accused of fueling the conflict through arms sales and political support. The United Nations, despite its best efforts, struggled to broker a ceasefire, highlighting the challenges of collective action in an increasingly polarized world. This conflict is yet another example of the volatile state of global affairs, illustrating the fragile nature of peace and the destructive potential of unresolved disputes. As we move forward, it's clear that we must strive for sustainable solutions to these conflicts rather than temporary ceasefires that merely delay the inevitable. The stakes are too high, and the cost in human lives is too great to do otherwise. A recent poll posed a poignant question to a demographic aged 18 to 35 years old. Would you fight for a rich man's war? The results were startling. A staggering 75% of respondents said no. They would not pick up arms for conflicts that, in their view, were orchestrated by elites who would never have to step foot on a battlefield themselves. This dramatic shift in perspective compared to previous generations could potentially alter the course of future wars. The implications are profound. If the youth refuse to participate in conflicts they perceive as unjust, could this prevent the escalation of international tensions into full-blown war? Perhaps. It certainly indicates a growing disillusionment with war among the younger generation. This disconnect between the decision-makers and those who bear the brunt of their decisions, our young people, is a stark reminder of the need for more inclusive and transparent governance. It's time to listen to these voices. They are the future, after all. The complexities in Great Britain have also just been further enhanced by the local by-election in Rochdale, which has seen George Galloway elected to Parliament, a controversial figure in British politics, and the death of Alexei Navalny in Russia by the hands of the Russian state, Navalny, an opposition force to Putin's war machine. As we navigate through the labyrinth of escalating global tensions, we must not lose sight of one of the most pressing humanitarian issues of our time, the global immigrant crisis. Over the past decade, conflicts and economic disparities have driven millions of people from their homes in search of safety and a better life. The United Nations estimates that there are currently over 79.5 million forcibly displaced people worldwide. These immigrants brave perilous journeys across oceans and through hostile territories, only to be met with a myriad of challenges in their host countries. They often face discrimination, lack of access to basic services, and the constant threat of deportation. The policies of many nations towards immigrants have been less than welcoming, further compounding their struggles. And let's not forget, the attitudes of the global community towards immigrants play a significant role in shaping these policies. In a world where borders seem to be hardening, empathy and understanding often take a backseat to fear and xenophobia. The immigrant crisis is not just a testament to the global inequalities and conflicts we face today, but also a reflection of our collective response to these issues. As we move forward, we must ask ourselves, are we doing enough to address this crisis? While global tensions rise, let's take a moment to focus on the situation closer to home, in the United Kingdom. Over the past decade, we've seen a dramatic increase in poverty levels. Austerity measures implemented in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis have hit the most vulnerable hardest, with the number of people living in poverty now exceeding 14 million. All the while, the elites wallow in their wealth and greed. Meanwhile, the wealth gap continues to widen. The richest 1% in the UK now own more than 20 times the total wealth of the poorest 20%. This disparity is not lost on the public. There's a growing outcry against the perceived greed of the elites, who seem to be profiting off the suffering of the many. The UK, like many other nations, is grappling with its own internal struggles, further complicating the global scenario. The tension between the haves and the have-nots is not just a domestic issue, it's a global one. And as we'll see in the next chapter, these domestic issues are only magnified by the global pandemic. In the midst of escalating international tensions and growing domestic inequality, Britain is also grappling with a significant immigration crisis of its own. Over the past decade, the number of immigrants in the UK has soared, with many seeking refuge from war-torn regions or simply hoping for a better life. However, their journey is far from easy. Upon arrival, these immigrants often face discrimination and a lack of access to basic services. Language barriers, cultural differences, and systemic biases make their integration into British society an uphill battle. Their struggles are often overlooked, yet they form an integral part of the UK's socio-economic fabric. The Brexit vote in 2016 further complicated matters. With Britain's exit from the European Union, immigration policies became stricter, leaving many immigrants uncertain about their future in the UK. The Brexit decision, largely driven by anti-immigrant sentiments, has not only affected the lives of these immigrants, but also deepened divisions within British society. As we continue to navigate through these global tensions, it's crucial to remember that every country has its own set of unique challenges. The immigration crisis in Britain is one such challenge, and it serves as a reminder of the complex and interconnected nature of the issues we face today. We will see how these domestic issues were further magnified by the global COVID-19 pandemic. In 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic hit, further exacerbating global tensions. As countries scrambled to secure vaccines and protect their citizens, old alliances were tested and new rivalries emerged. Global cooperation took a backseat to national interests, leading to a fractured international response. In the years that followed, we saw the rise of authoritarianism and nationalism in several countries. These trends have only added fuel to the fire, increasing the risk of conflict. There are many conspiracy theories surrounding COVID-19, many believing it was perpetuated as a social cleansing program deliberately by the elites. The world order established after World War II seems to be unraveling, with no clear replacement in sight. Fast forward to today, in 2024, and the situation seems even more precarious. Ongoing conflicts in regions like the Middle East and Eastern Europe continue to escalate, with large powers often backing opposing sides. The threat of nuclear proliferation looms large, and the climate crisis is worsening. So what have we learned from this journey through recent history? First, the world is more interconnected than ever, and conflicts in one region can quickly spill over into others. Second, the rise of nationalism and authoritarianism is a threat to global stability. Third, the world is facing a host of shared challenges, from pandemics to climate change, that require global cooperation. In conclusion, the risk of World War III is perhaps higher now than at any time since the end of the Cold War. But it is not inevitable. The world has the tools to resolve conflicts peacefully, promote cooperation, and build a more equitable global order. The question is, will it use them? As a final footnote, you have to consider this. When World War III starts, we personally think it already has. For sure, the media narrative owned by the elites is pushing this agenda, getting us ready and primed for World War. What will you do? What you, the population of the world, has to think about is, where will the perpetrators be hiding when war breaks out? Where will the billionaires be whilst world annihilation is happening? That's right, safe in their bunkers. We the fodder will be left to perish. We the elite slaves are just that, slaves and replaceable. So is it true the New World Order wants this, to depopulate the planet? Is it any wonder Elon Musk desperately wants to colonize Mars? So do we prepare for the aftermath of nuclear war? Prepare to fight? Fight for the rich man who cares nothing about us? Who despises us? Only us, the masses, can change this. Only by coming together can we stop the psychotic leaders we have today destroying this oasis we call home. We leave you with these sobering thoughts. As ever, we thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed this brief documentary. I'm Francesca Grames, and my co-presenter was Ajita Supur. This has been a World Liberation Army short documentary. See you soon.